Does Google have a brand loyalty problem with their Pixel smartphones? Over the last several days, you've maybe seen some headlines going around, some articles going around with that headline. It all comes back to this article from Stockalytics.com. Google's smartphones face huge loyalty issues. 57% of owners plan to switch to another brand. Now, this might actually be surprising because over the last, 18 months, 2 years or so, we've seen a lot of news about how Google's Pixel phones are gaining market share. Now, we're talking about a small amount of market share, right? I mean, Samsung and Apple own the world, but they were slowly climbing their way up. 2%, 3%, 4%, maybe 5% market share. So it may be, like I said, a bit surprising to you to hear something this negative, given the prior news had all been fairly positive. Let's scroll down here, and we're going to look at the raw data, and there is, deceptively a lot of things worth talking about here. Google's smartphone loyalty problem. Editor Shane here just realized I never actually mentioned that this data was supposed to be for the United States. So keep that in mind. So this was the question: how likely are you to change your smartphone brand on the next possible occasion by currently used brands? So Apple, 50% of people said very unlikely, 34% said very likely. Samsung was very similar. They had 34% of users saying they were very likely to switch phones. 44% were staying put. On the Google side, you are, flip-flopped in the worst possible way. Only a quarter of users were saying we're staying put. 57% said we are leaving the Pixel world. Now is where we have to actually dig in, and there's a couple of things I immediately have to point out to you. So this was not information that was generated by Stockalytics. It was done by Statista. Statista? I have no idea how you would pronounce that. And if you sort of follow the rabbit trail, you end up with this article, which was from May 14th. It appears as though this was actually the impetus for this article. And they have this Statista Consumer Insights survey where apparently this data actually originates. It's important to do these things. Let's actually track this stuff back. Unfortunately, I have to request access to get this data. You have to have an account, and I'm just not going to do that. But what I have been told from people who have done this, who have these accounts, is that this data is round about a year old. So that is very important. This is actually not most up-to-date information. So at the same time, this poll, this bit of data was indicating lots of people switching away from the Pixel devices. We also had news saying that they were gaining market share. Here's an article that talks about Alphabet's Q1 sales from 2023, touting an 8.8% increase with their Pixel sales. So around the same time, sales are actually increasing. Here's another article from Android Authority. Google has doubled its market share for Pixel phones in the US since last year. This was in September of 2023. So again, we have a little bit of sort of confusing, conflicting information here. Maybe not necessarily conflicting, right? Because let's be fair about this. They could be selling more while people are, potentially wanting to leave. So maybe more new people are coming in than this number of people are leaving. That's entirely possible. Another thing that we have to consider here is that this is a survey of 10,000 people. And that's not a small number, but it's not necessarily like a massive number either. And I think because of that, your margin of error is likely to be kind of large. And I think I have some good I wouldn't say evidence, but some intuition that there is a pretty bad margin of error for these results. And I'm going to bring your attention to one brand here, Apple. 34% of Apple iPhone users in this poll are very likely to switch brands. I have an exceedingly hard time believing that that is accurate. In fact, I'll just straight up tell you, I don't think there's any reality where that's true. Only 50% of people say that they're very unlikely to leave their iPhone, but I don't buy this. I just don't think that that's right. But instead of just sitting here and reading you conflicting reports and talking about how I don't think that this could possibly be accurate, therefore maybe none of this is super accurate, and maybe polling 10,000 people isn't enough to actually get the full, picture of what's going on. Does this literally only have two answers? Very likely, very unlikely. Maybe there should be some granularity in there. there's some problems here. I wanted to go a step further. I made my own poll. Try and shed some additional light on this. You have 4 options in my poll. Non-Pixel user, next phone will be non-Pixel. Non-Pixel user, next phone will be Pixel. You're coming over to the Pixel bandwagon. Pixel user, next phone will be non-Pixel. So you're leaving, and then Pixel user, next phone will be Pixel. You're staying put. And what I'm showing here, and look, we're going to address the contamination issue, the skewing of my poll results here in just a second. But what I'm showing is the vast majority of people, whatever brand they're using, they're probably just sticking with it for the next phone. And Pixel users, by and large, they have their Pixel phone and they're just staying with their Pixel phone. I am fully aware that my YouTube channel does have a lot of Pixel super fans watching. Totally get that. And because of that, my results are not going to be reflective of the general population. They're going to be skewed more friendly towards Pixel phones. Totally get it. I just think it's interesting that if you remove the non-Pixel results from this, you now have like 70-something% of Pixel users who watch my content saying, no, I'm staying with my Pixel phones. They seem to actually really like them. But we need to kind of address this, though. Like, let's approach this. Which page was this? Let's approach this as if it were accurate, as if Google does have this catastrophic loyalty problem. And let's think about what might be driving that. I don't think it's real. I don't think that's actually a thing, but let's pretend it is. One thing that immediately came to mind is that anytime I cover Pixel phone launches, people complain about the trade-in deals, right? So maybe that's a problem, right? Maybe the fact that other brands have better trade-in deals is actually pulling people away from the Pixel brand. You can take your old Pixel phone and trade it in, and for a little bit of money, get a Samsung phone or something like that. I think that's absolutely a possibility. Another thing that immediately came to mind for me is the negative impact of this AI push. There is a ton of AI fatigue. People are so sick of hearing about this stuff that I wonder if it's actually turning people off and making people want to leave and go to another OEM. Now, I see stuff like this all the time where people don't necessarily realize the full scope of what's going on. They think if I leave Pixels and buy a Samsung phone, I can escape AI. Of course, that's not true. There's no phone brand you're going to be able to go to where the stuff is not going to be going on to some degree. But again, maybe this is turning people off. Anytime I live stream a Google event, I see comment after comment, people making jokes about how it's just, they're beating us over the head with this stuff. And even though I think a lot of it's actually really cool, a lot of the features are really, really interesting, it may be fatiguing some people. There's also the reputation that Pixel phones have of being a little bit problematic, right? So people talk about the Tensor chip. Oh, it gets too hot. It overheats. The modem isn't as good. It's slower. Causes the battery life to be bad when you're out on cellular data. Now, these things are varying degrees of truth for different people, different circumstances, but that reputation can be something that could be damaging for Google. And if you are someone who maybe you live in an area where that lesser modem is a bigger problem that kills your battery, it could cause you to switch brands. Absolutely. None of these things are things that really affect or bother me, but that doesn't mean it doesn't affect or bother you. And if someone else hears about your problems, it may put them off from buying the brand. I do have to wonder, though, if down the line, things like Tensor G5 will pull people back in. We've heard the rumors. I brought you guys a report just a couple days ago that the Tensor G5 is finally going to be produced by TSMC. It's no longer going to be based off of a Samsung Exynos processor, fully custom, apparently, from the ground up, made by a better foundry. That should mean a far better modem as well. Tensor G5 may be a landmark thing for Pixel phones. The Pixel 10 may be a landmark device that sheds a lot of those negative preconceptions. How big of an impact will that make? Time will tell. And of course, we have the elephant of all elephants in the room, and it is the Google graveyard. It is this perception that even though the Pixel 9 is just around the corner, that Google could just up and say, we're done with Pixel phones and cancel them outright at any given time. While I don't think that that is something we should be all that worried about, given the fact that we know the 9 is on the way, the 10 is currently being worked on. Look, guys, we're a decade into Pixel devices, and if you include Nexus devices, we are well over a decade in. I get why some people have this fear, and that might be a reason why somebody might want to jump ship. Maybe they like their Pixel phone, but they're just afraid there's no future for it, so they're going to leave. And unfortunately, headlines like this that talk about other people leaving might sort of reinforce this feeling that there is more doom and gloom than there actually is. The reality is that Pixel phones, from every other piece of information data that we have, they seem to be doing better and better each year. The perception for many is reality. So guys, I don't think it's quite time to pull the fire alarm and start panicking just yet. I find it really hard to believe that the Pixel 6 was the best-selling Pixel phone ever. Then the 7 beat that. The 8, we don't know where it quite is, but it's hard for me to believe that these things are true. And also that no one wants to keep their Pixel phones. Maybe I'm crazy. Look, I have no problem thinking that maybe Pixel phones have a slightly higher percentage of people switching brands over Apple for sure, and maybe over Samsung. But I don't think that it's this, almost double thing that this article seems to be implying that it is. But that's just my opinion. I gave you guys my reasoning, and I also tried to be fair and gave you guys reasoning for why there could be problems with Pixel brand loyalty. But I'd love to hear from you guys in the comments down below. Let me know what you think about it. Subscribe for more content just like this, and until next time, stay nerdy, my friends.